Alright, Pretender here, back with another Honkai Star guide, and today I'm here with the guide of who you should be prepping to choose in the 2.7 update when they do give us the free 5-star selector ticket. So this video is going to be going over each of the 7 standard characters and talking about what makes them good, their weaknesses, whether they're still good to this day, and then also talking about if they have like a dupe that's worth getting specifically. Some of these guys are going to be really short to talk about because there are some that are just generally not worth considering at all. But yeah, that's all I want to say before I consider the video. If you guys find this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, make sure to drop a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with other types of guides, showcases, summons, news, practically anything you could ask for. Would be greatly appreciated, and let's get straight into the video. So first, just as a brief little recap on the stream, if you guys have not really been keeping up with the game or you don't really know what happened in the 2.7 stream, besides everything else that we're going to get, like such as update from the maintenance rewards, new stuff, new content, new characters, there was the announcement that we are going to be given a free 5-star selector. It will be available right when 2.7 does go live, and we will be able to claim that and choose a free permanent 5-star character. So that's one of the 7, being Gepard, Himeko, Bailu, Yanqing, Bronya, Welt, and Clara. So just wanted to clarify that before we get into the actual video. So first, I'm going to be starting with Gepard. To this day, there is practically only 2 real shielders, and that is Gepard and Aventurine. Aventurine is obviously significantly stronger in practically every way, but for players who might not have him or don't want him but still need a shielder in some way, shape, or form, Gepard to this day is still a pretty viable option. The shield he does provide from the ultimate is quite strong, and a proper build Gepard with the right amount of energy regeneration rate from the rope and such is able to have good uptime, plus he does have a trace that does let him have higher chances to be attacked by enemies, and obviously getting attacked will help him have more energy uptime because when you do get attacked you do regenerate some energy. So combine that together and you're able to get the uptime on his shield from the ultimate pretty often. On top of that, he is also able to freeze with the skill, so if you're in a very sticky situation or you want an enemy to be attacking you less, you're able to freeze that enemy with a 65% base chance from the skill, which is actually pretty handy. On top of that, if your Gepard does get attacked a lot or he gets hit by a very hard single target blow, his talent actually does let him get revived. So once per battle, you're able to revive if you do get knocked down and immediately restore 50% of his max HP. So Gepard himself has some pretty good stuff going for him. Now if you already have him and you're looking for dupes, for the most part, Gepard's dupes are pretty bad, but his E1 is pretty good. Since it does increase the base chance to inflict freeze from the skill, it will increase that 65% base chance by 35%. So you have a 100% base chance to freeze that enemy. So the first dupe is actually pretty damn solid, but the rest aren't too great. Second one, when you do have an enemy become unfrozen, their speed is reduced by 20% for 1 turn, especially from how fast enemies are getting now. That's not really noticeable. His 4th Eidolon gives everyone 20% effect res when he's in the battle, which is slightly nice if you don't have the broken kill requirement on some of your supports, which for the most part is really easy to get anyways. It's not really needed as well. And then his last dupe is like, you'd consider his dupes trying to help him not die, but his E6 promotes him dying because when he does proc his talent and revives, he immediately takes action and restores an extra 50% of his max HP, which cool, but still not the greatest. So when it comes to dupes, the only one you really should consider is E1. And so once again, the only issues with him is that refreshing the shield still can pose to be difficult, since even he does have the boosted chance to be attacked with one of his traces. So there are times where your shield might actually break and you won't be able to get it back, as opposed to someone like Aventurine who could just refresh it from his skill, so it's a lot easier. Plus he has a follow-up attack that can refresh it a bit. Gepard's only source of refreshing his shield is from his ultimate, which can still propose to be a little difficult at times. But once again, his spot in the current meta is still pretty solid, as he is the only other shielder we do have currently, so he's not the worst option you can consider. Next unit I'm going to talk about is Himeko. Himeko was pretty weak for the most part, but with the new Pure Fiction mode, she's actually relatively strong, since with her in Pure Fiction, you're able to clear relatively easily, thanks to the fact that she's able to proc Victory Rush really easily in that mode if you do take other people that can help her break. And since in Pure Fiction, the enemies have lower toughness bars, so it's a lot easier to break them, so it's really easy to charge up Victory Rush and get constant procs of that follow-up attack, which is again AoE, so it will hit everyone. So if you're also running something like a Super Break Himeko in there, which is pretty viable, not only is the damage really good, but it's just so easy to break anyone with fire weakness. Issues with Himeko is that she practically isn't really useful outside of Pure Fiction, so if you already have teams that can clear Pure Fiction without her, then you really won't have much use from picking her. She can be used in Apocalyptic Shadow decently well, but it definitely does have to heavily favor her and help her in some way, and they have to be weak to fire and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty frequent, so she still could be good in there. And then in MLC, the moment it's not anything break related or they don't have fire weakness, she is going to get absolutely cooked. so definitely would not recommend running her in MLC either. When it does come to her dupes, Himeko actually does have some pretty solid dupes. Her E1's really good because when you do trigger the follow-up attack, she does get a 20% speed increase for 2 turns, so she can attack more. Her E2 helps her do 50% more damage to enemies that have 50% or less HP, which stat dupe is whatever. E4 on her actually does let her get an extra charge if you do break someone with the skill, so if you're able to play correctly and break more with their skill over her follow-up attack, which is still a little difficult to do since her follow-up attack is the main source, you can get even faster charges. And then her E6 just has her ultimate deal damage 2 extra times, each dealing fire damage equal to 40% of the original damage to a random enemy, which is practically whatever. So when it comes to dupes, E1 and E4 are the ones you want to look out for. So as I mentioned, her current state in the meta, she's really good in Pure Fiction still. This Apocalyptic Shadow, she's functioning well, but when it shies away from this and they might not have fire weakness, it's going to be a very, very big problem for her. And then in MLC, once it's any way, shape, or form outside of not being break, or just not having fire weakness, she is practically unusable there. So if you're someone that already has your Pure Fiction team set, then she is not really the option you want to look out for. But if you do have something that you need for Pure Fiction, maybe you need to build a team around a certain character, Himeko is a great option then. Next character I want to talk about is Bailu. So Bailu is unfortunately one of the few characters I'm going to say that is genuinely not worth considering. While yes, Bailu for a newer player can be really good, you're really better off just using a 4-star like Lynx instead. Bailu's kit allows her to actually heal a pretty good amount, and she's also able to revive someone that does get taken down in the battle. She also has it where characters with the invigoration thing that she does have from her ultimate actually take reduced damage as well, which is also pretty damn solid. Bailu's dupes, her E1 is pretty good because if you have someone at their max HP, when the invigoration ends, you can get an extra 8 energy for that target, so definitely take a little bit of plague and you want to make sure you have max HP before that wears off. Her E2 gives you an additional outgoing healing bonus, which you get after using the ultimate, but you don't really need that since she already does heal a lot. Her E4 allows every healing provided by the skill, makes the recipient deal 10% more damage for 2 turns, stacking up to 3 times. So a nice little damage increase, but nothing too crazy. And then her E6 allows you to have another revive in the battle, so you can revive up to 2 allies in a battle. So if you're able to play around having an ally have max HP when the invigoration ends, E1 is a good target. Her E4 is also good for the extra damage increase, and then her E6 is also pretty nice for the extra revive you can get. But her state in the current meta is she is literally never used. While she may have a bunch of healing, the main crucial thing is she has 0 cleanse, and there's a lot of things in this game that can inflict status on you. So moment you get CC'd or you have a bunch of dot effects on you, it's practically GG. On top of that, besides the E4, she doesn't really provide other buffs, so she could have great healing, but we're in a place where the sustain should also have debuffs to make enemies maybe take more damage, maybe take increased crit damage like Aventurine does with his ultimate, take them more break damage like Link and Gallagher, or be really, really good buffers at the same time like Huopo gives everyone 20% max energy respectively, and a big increase to attack. Fuchuan can give crit rate and max HP. Bailu, outside of E4, does not give anything. So Bailu is definitely a character I do not recommend getting at all. Next character is Yanqing, and this pains me to say this, but this is the least character you should consider getting. While Yanqing can cook, you kind of need high investments teams to actually make him cook. You're gonna 100% need a shielder so you can keep Soul Steel Sync active, because if you do get hit, the Soul Steel Sync is gone, and boom, Yanqing practically just becomes disabled. On top of that, even with the buffs up and everything you could get from Yanqing, his damage output is not too great. And then when we are looking at his dupes, practically all his dupes are relatively whatever. E1 when he's attacking a frozen enemy, he deals additional ice damage equal to 60% of his attack. E2 when you do have Soul Steel Sync active, his energy regeneration rate increases by an extra 10%, which is also just whatever. His E4 when the current HP percentage is 80% or higher. Yanqing will get a ice res pen increase by 12%, which again is kind of whatever. And then his E6, if the buffs from Soul Steel Sync or the ultimate are in effect when an enemy is defeated, the duration of these buffs is extended by 1 turn, which is also just kind of whatever. His toughness damage isn't that good, his actual damage isn't that good. You need him to avoid taking any form of damage so the Soul Steel Sync is active, so you need a really strong shield, usually from Aventurine, and you just need a bunch of investment to make him actually do some good damage. So Yanqing, in the current meta, no one uses him unless you're moving around or you're trying to do some low tier clear kind of things. That's why I do not recommend getting him, as much as it pains me to say, because Yanqing is really cool. Now the next character is Bronya. So Bronya, to this day, is actually insanely good still. She's a really good harmony buffer, which allows you to select an ally, dispel a debuff from them, give them another turn, and increase their damage by 66%, while her ultimate gives a big increase to attack and also increases all allies' crit damage by an amount based off her own. On top of that, for her just existing, she also makes everyone do 10% more damage, which is also very nice. And also on top of that, her eidolons are actually really good. Her E1, when you do use skill, you have a 50% chance of recovering a skill point and has a 1-turn cooldown. So every time you're able to actually have that in effect, there's a chance that you could not consume a skill point, which could be really, really big. Since Bronya's main issue is that she's relatively SP negative, and so this can help offset it a little bit if you do get lucky. Her E2, when you do use the skill, the target ally's speed increases by 30% after taking action for 1 turn. So you get to do the act that she will give, and on top of that, that ally has a 30% speed increase, which is also very, very good. Her E4 is actually insane. After any other ally uses a base attack on an enemy target that has wind weakness, Bronya immediately launches one instance of a follow-up attack dealing wind damage equal to 80% of her basic attack damage and triggers once per turn. So this can help for very nice damage output overall if you are running someone else that can do a basic attack. So if you aren't running someone that does a basic attack, then it can be useless. And then her E6, the duration of the damage boost effect placed by the skill on the target ally increases by 1 turn. So now that skill lasts for 2 turns, which is also very, very good. So when it does come to dupe goals, Bronya herself at E0 is already fantastic. E1 is definitely an eidolon you want to get so you have the chance to offset her skill point consumption. E2 is also a really good dupe you want to look out for. E4 you only want to look out for if you're using her with someone that does have a basic attack or you want to do some funny shenanigans. E6 isn't really one you gotta look out for. It is really good, but you do not need to look out for it. Mainly 1 and 2 are the ones you want to get. And then Bronya's current state in the meta, she is still very, very meta. A lot of teams she was kind of booted off by Sparkle, but when it comes to stuff like the Boo Hill team, Bronya is really, really good with Boo Hill. Any form of break character, she's going to be performing a little better. And then any unit that is a crit DPS that wants to get some turns, she will be good with if you can manage the skill points. So Bronya is definitely a character I would recommend picking. Next character is the GOAT himself, Welt. So unfortunately, Welt isn't too used because he's more of a niche character. A skill does bounce, so it's going to hit random enemies, and on hit there's a 75% base chance to reduce enemy speed by 10%, which can be pretty good, but enemies down really fast, so that can be practically useless. His ultimate is really good though, because when you do use it, on top of doing damage, it has a 100% base chance for enemies hit by it to be imprisoned for 1 turn. So that's a 40% action delay and 10% speed reduction, which is really, really good. His talent lets him do more damage to enemies that are already slowed, and thanks to his bonus trace, when you do use your ultimate, you have a 100% base chance to increase damage taken by targets that are hit by the ultimate by 12% for 2 turns. So relatively a pretty good general debuff. When it comes to his eidolons, they are not that crazy. His E1, after you do use his ultimate, Welt gets enhanced, and the next 2 times you use your basic attack or skill, you deal 1 additional instance of damage to the enemy, which is alright. It's not really the biggest damage increase. His E2 is pretty good, as it does let you get 3 energy when you trigger his talent, which is really easy to trigger, so it can also help with uptime on the ultimate. His E4 increases base chance for the skill to inflict speed reduction by 35%, which can be pretty good, and then his E6 lets him deal damage 1 extra time when using the skill, so you have 1 extra damage instance. The dupes you mainly want to look out for him is practically just E2. E4 is the other pretty solid one. E1 is kind of whatever, and then E6 is kind of overrated. Since it is literally just 1 extra little hit, it's not going to do much. So, Welt himself isn't a terrible character. He's pretty solid, it's just he doesn't really have many places to be used. Meme stuff like Break Welt is pretty solid, but again, it's more of a meme thing. There was also the whole thing with Sustain Welt, but that is relatively hard to play, and it's getting harder and harder as enemies get faster and faster. So that's something you potentially don't want to do. The only real spot he kind of has is if you don't have Acheron's optimal teammates, then Welt is actually a pretty damn solid option on there, albeit not the greatest. So I only recommend getting Welt if you are looking for a teammate for Acheron, or you may have something in mind where he would be useful. And then the final character is Clara. So Clara, for the most part, is a very, very solid character. The only reason she kind of got booted off in her solid spot is because Yunli really power kept her to a big extent. Because Yunli just deals so much more damage, she can taunt. It's actually insane how much better Yunli is. But that does not mean Clara is bad. Clara, to this day, is still really good. Her skill is a full AoE, so it hits everyone. And also, if they're inflicted with Mark of Counter, you deal additional damage to them, but you will remove the Marks of Counter if you do that. Her ultimate actually does enhance the counter you get from the talent, so now it becomes a blast counter that does more damage and can be used 2 times. On top of that, if you do use your ultimate, Clara gets an additional. On top of that, when you do use your ultimate, Clara has a greatly increased chance to be attacked. So if you're able to use the ultimate charges, that's going to wear off pretty quickly, since it's just the next time anyone gets hit on your team. Since when you do get the ultimate enhance, anyone on your team can get hit and it will retaliate with that counter. And then for the next 2 turns, you have a better chance to be attacked. So more counters and more energy. When it comes to dupes, Clara's dupes are actually pretty solid. Her E1 is really nice because when you do use your skill, you no longer remove the marks of counters, so that's really, really good. Her E2, when you do use ultimate, you get a 30% increase to attack. Her E4, when she is hit, she reduces the damage received by 30% and lasts until the start of her next turn. And then her E6, when anyone on her team is attacked, you have a 50% fixed chance to trigger a counter attack on the attacker and also mark them with mark of counter. On top of that, when you do use your ultimate, you have an additional enhanced counter. So now instead of having 2, you have 3. So the dupes you mainly want to look out for are E1 and E6. So Clara's spot to this day, she is still really, really solid. If you don't have Yunli, she performs really, really well still. At E0, she's really good. At E1, she becomes a lot better because you no longer remove marks of counter and you can spam the skill from her energy, so that's really, really good as well. And there isn't the craziest amount of physical DPSs, so she does fill that role pretty well. So Clara is a recommended option that would be pretty good. And so here is my final ranking on what I would recommend. So going from the top, I genuinely do not recommend picking either of these for the reasons I did mention in the video. For niche uses, you can get Welt. So if you really like him and you want to use him for niche use, then you can consider him. Gepard only if you do need a shielder or you have a lack of sustains, then he isn't the worst option you could pick. Himeko only would recommend if you do need a team or a unit for pure fiction, mainly because that's where she does shine practically always. And then Bronya and Clara are the ones I mainly recommend to use anywhere. Since Clara, she isn't the greatest in Apocalyptic Shadow, but in Pure Fiction she's really good, MLC she's really good, and then Bronya is good anywhere. So these are the main 2 characters I would generally recommend. If you need a DPS, Clara is fantastic. If you need a Harmony support, Bronya is fantastic. And so the list explains itself, and then for the reasons I did mention in the video. But yep, that is the entire video. Hope you guys did find the video helpful. Peace out.